The United States faces allegations of covering up war crimes in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Watchdog Human Rights Watch claims the United States covered up violations of UN sanctions by certain rebel leaders. They are supposed to have stopped the release of a UN inquiry into those violations. This week, Africa Today discusses the alleged violations, asking why the US might want to stop this particular story being told.
Human Rights Watch has criticized the US for covering up information on war crimes being committed by rebels in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The report by the watchdog has uncovered how the US used its influence to stop the publication of a UN inquiry exposing violations of UN sanctions by rebels led by General Bosco Ntaganda in the DRC. The ex-Congolese general, also known as Terminator, and other Congolese army officers deserted the army to form a rebellion against President Joseph Kabila. But the activities of the rebels have rendered tens of thousands homeless and caused many deaths. Analysts believe the reason the US wants to block the report is because of its ally, Rwanda. Rwanda and its president, Paul Kagame, are accused of supporting the rebels in the east of the country. Since the Rwanda genocide, when 800,000 ethnic Tutsis and moderate Hutus were slaughtered, Western nations, including the United States, have formed a close relationship with Rwanda. This relationship, driven by guilt for failing to stop the genocide, has the US worrying over the controversy the report might create. Africa Today now looks at US cover-up in DR Congo and asks why they would block the UN report on war crimes.
Nearly 20,000 strong, the UN peacekeeping force has been in the Democratic Republic of Congo for over a decade. This isn't the first time UN sanctions have been broken in this seemingly endless conflict. I'm Vuiswang Wongwana, welcoming you to Africa Today. Although the main protagonist is Rwanda, accused of maintaining a long-standing vendetta against Hutu rebels in the Congo, the flow of weapons into the Congo has prompted Amnesty International to call for an international treaty to limit weapons transfers into the DRC. Weapons sent to the DRC include tear gas, armored cars, artillery and mortars. And yet, what about the unpublished report? What has the United States got to do with any of this? Here to discuss are Vava Tampa, who's the founder of Save the Congo, and Baffour Ankomah, the editor of New African magazine. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And before we start, I really need to stress that we tried our best to get Human Rights Watch onto the program, but unfortunately none of their Congo experts were available. Remember, Human Rights Watch stand accused by Rwanda of spreading some very dangerous rumors. And with that in mind, if I could come to you, Vava, as a Congolese person, what are your thoughts on the Human Rights Watch report?
Well, this isn't the first time that the United Nations or Human Rights Watch or other Congolese NGOs have accused Rwanda of arming, training and funding militia gangs as well as warlords in Congo. This is an historical fact, an established fact, based on evidence, based on intercepted radio calls, based on intelligence, that we know that Kagame has been funding armed groups in Congo, fueling armed groups in Congo for over a decade. And he has been doing so for both political and economical reasons. So this isn't the first time, and neither would it be the last time. So
despite the protestations of various ministers of Kagame's government, you don't believe a word of it?
Not at all. No one would believe them. We know it from the start to the end. And there is no minister in the UK or no minister in the US or diplomat in the UN who would at all, under any circumstance, believe Kagame that he's not funding or fueling armed groups in Congo. This is a factual.
Is it as factual as that, as black and white as that, from your point of view, Baffour? Could there be an argument be made that Kagame is behaving in a certain way because it suits his interests and those of the people and countries backing him?
It has always been as black and white. Because going back to when the Congo War started, Uganda and Rwanda were the countries used by the US to fight Mobutu. Mm-hmm. Kabila the elder was enjoying his life in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, and was pulled to be the local face of the rebellion. And they used the Rwandese and the Ugandan troops as Kabila's boys to go and kick out Mobutu. And so it has always been. But to come back to what is now,
yes,
why the U.S. doesn't want the UN report. I just came back from Africa 4 weeks ago, and I pick up from a very high source. Young Kabila wants to negotiate the oil deal that Mobutu signed with the U.S. An American company is exploiting the Congolese oil, and the deal is not in favor of Congo. So the young president wants it renegotiated. And as we see usually, the American oil companies will run back to Washington and get the American government on their side. So I hear they told President Kabila, if you don't want war, don't touch this deal. And he wants to change the deal. So all of a sudden, we see Intaganda's rebellion starting.
Okay, all of it is a huge distraction. We've got the ICC looking for this guy. And, you know, people who perhaps are not fully conversant with the history may not be aware of the multiple layers that are currently playing. What role would you give the US? Would you agree totally with what Baffour has just said?
No, I would sadly not agree with my dear panelist. Now, the US clearly has played an incredible role in Congo and the region. The US supplies both Rwanda and the Congolese government. It's almost as if you're betting on every single horses in the race. So the US has this incredible, massive influence on both sides.
Yes.
Now, Congo is in trouble, if we are to be political, because Kabila is utterly and completely incompetent. He has been absent from the national scene and the international scene. The Congolese people, the Congo as a country, has no leader talking on our behalf. So now you have the civil society such as the Congo and others essentially doing the task. That is the chief reason why we are in trouble. Now, in terms of humanitarian terms, we are in this trouble because of impunity, insecurity, institutional failure, in terms of the institution of the state are not working, and illicit trade of minerals, which I think does relate to the point my dear panelist has made. Those are the four major issues. Nonetheless, the US does not need to kick Kabila. The US does not need Rwanda to support another militia gangs in Congo for Kabila to be forced to give the US, whether it's diamond, cotton, or timber. The US does not need to do that. They simply need to make a phone call, and Kabila would say yes, and he's always said yes.
Okay.
But in this case, he's not wanting to play ball. I pick it up from a very high source in the region. Very high, so very, very reliable. And Kabila doesn't want to play ball. He's saying our resources are being taken for a song. This US oil company is taking our resources for a song. Mobutu signed a bad deal. Let's renegotiate. And the American oil company doesn't want to renegotiate. So they said, okay, if you don't want to play ball, then you shall see action.
So all these, the armory I was mentioning at the beginning of the program, I mean, there's a free flow of weapons coming into that region to keep the whole conflict stoked up, seemingly. Who do you think might be behind that?
I have always, because I've covered Congo and I followed the Congo war for a long time. Without the US, much of the things that we are seeing in Congo would have stopped long ago. I will not take it past them at all, because they will pass it to Rwanda. That's why Rwanda more or less has had this impunity. First, it was a good friend in Kampala, and now they are using two of them. In Congo, they use them for a long time, and it looks as if now it is Rwanda, as Human Rights Watch is saying, that's being used. So they'll pass the weapons through there and
because in the press they are busy arguing. You're seeing Africans arguing with Africans about this issue, but very little being mentioned about the role of other powers that seem to hold, literally, the purse strings, even though the wealth belongs to the African nations.
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned the issues of African arguing against African, because this conflict essentially is about African killing Africans, and that's the side part of this conflict. Now, if we go back 20 years ago, Mobutu was the bigger fish in the continent, the bigger fish in the region. Mobutu helped ensure that Angola remained in instability. Mobutu made Zaire at the time, which has become Congo now, the headquarters of the West supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa. And Mobutu now, after the Berlin Wall, Mobutu was seen as, useless to the new world. He was forced out, and now we have Kagame and Museveni in Uganda as the new dog. So it's simply the same game with different people and different figures. Now,
yes,
we can always continue and blame the US and so forth,
sure,
but we must remember that this is Kagame, an African man, born in Africa, bred in Africa, helping destabilize a big, massive part of the African continent.
Right, and we will get into more African-orientated views, solutions, the potential for solutions on that. But surely, as you've said, Baffour, the US and its allies are just watching and, not doing anything about what they claim to be a humanitarian crisis. They've even arrested some of their own famous personalities who've campaigned on this issue to try and expose it.
Isn't it amazing? When we just had Charles Taylor being sentenced to 50 years in prison for aiding and abetting, going across the border to Sierra Leone to do the same kind of things that are happening in DR Congo, supposedly being done by Rwanda. So why would the US and this other one, Britain and company, not want to stop it? It's because their usual good boys are doing it on their behalf.
Right.
As simple as that.
Right, and I think a lot of Africans are aware of that. And talking of which, we are going to look at your point of view, dear viewer, because we have a facility for you to share your opinion. Please feel free. And we have some comments on our Facebook fan page here. Munya, who lives in Zimbabwe, says, "The Americans, as ever, have a destructive influence on the Congo in the same way they harbored and bred kleptocrats like Mobutu. Can't expect anything new from them in the 21st century." And from emails, a comment from Moses in Nigeria. Moses says he's sorry to say this, but most of these so-called Western countries are after resources rather than conflict resolution. And from our text facility, we have one from Malawi and from Gerladi. Gerladi says the US is not a world peace protector. They are in Africa in the name of peacekeeping. If they call themselves peacekeepers, then why are they hiding the UN information on DR Congo? And indeed, that is the very question that we are asking. We will know in 2 weeks' time from the recording of this program. Let us know what you think on this topic. Email africa@presstv.co.uk, or if you prefer, text +44 78 0000 8086. And that Facebook fan page is Africa Today, Press TV London. As I was just saying, Vava, 2 weeks from the day we're recording this show, this report, I mean, at least they've promised that the hidden stuff is going to come out. Do you think in that interim period of the delay, something has occurred that may have changed the force of what was written there if it had come out at the scheduled time?
Well, the UN has done something amazing already. They have leaked the report, so we already know the content of the report. We already know the extent to which Kagame and James, because the fact is, James Kabarebe, who's been named in the report, would not go, and speak to M23 or so forth without the green light from Kagame.
Okay,
that's
for our viewers,
fact.
M23 is one of the rebel groups.
One of the rebel that has been, came into existence a few months ago. Now, we have a history of rebels, leaders, rebel groups in Congo for many years now. Yeah. It began as RCD Goma, which was the initial rebel group created by Kagame. In 2006, RCD Goma changed its name. They became CNDP. Under Kunda and Taganda, and recently in 2012, 6 years later, they've changed again. They've become M23,
so
and we suppose
force.
In 3 years or 5 years' time, they would probably change again, become another rebel group. But now the simple fact is this: behind every single rebel groups in CNDP, RCD Goma, also there is one man behind it, and that is Paul Kagame. He is the commander-in-chief, the sole shareholders in these rebel groups. RCD Goma, M23 are nothing but toddlers of the Rwandan Patriotic Army.
This is a very frustrating and painful story that is so symptomatic and typical of what has happened to the whole of the continent. Would you say, just to complete the historical perspective, that since the assassination of Lumumba, nothing's gone right for the DRC?
And that's how much the Americans wanted it. I have followed Congo very well in the history. I like history. And if you found out the man who was given the poison to go and put in Lumumba's toothpaste was the one who wrote, Devlin, I'm talking about him, did his memoirs, and he admits there that even the invitation by Lumumba to bring in the UN troops was the suggestion of the American ambassador in Libreville at the time. And we shouldn't only limit it to Rwanda. Paul Kagame could not do the things that you have just enumerated without the link to Washington. So if Africans want this resolved, we should go to the roots, go to Washington and say, please stop it. Because Paul, looking at what has happened to Charles Taylor, will not do the things you have just said. Because he knows the ICC will be on there. Why hasn't the ICC even come in at all? Because there are some bigger powers behind Paul Kagame.
And is it okay, fair, or even worth it to go to America to say, well, come on, sort this out, because it's not in their interests?
I tell you what, I still have a lot of faith in President Obama. I think he's one of the few presidents in the United States, like Bush, who will do something amazing for Congo and potentially for Africa. Now, we know that when he was a senator, the only bill he ever wrote or sponsored in the Senate in the US was on the Congo. So I still believe he will do something positive in that continent. Now, we often speak of the situation in Congo as a Congolese issue or a regional matter, but that's not quite true, because the fact is, without the Congo, the African continent could not possibly go forward. Congo is the only country that sits right in the middle of Africa.
And it's 2/3 the size of Europe. Some people may not be aware.
Absolutely.
It's huge.
Touching both the east, the west, the north, and the south. Without Congo, prosperity in South America, in South Africa, sorry, cannot be linked to prosperity in North Africa.
Yes.
So that's how incredible Congo is. Now, we can continue, and I believe this is absolutely correct, because we know the US has paid, the US and Britain have armed, trained, and also funded the Kagame regime. We can, of course, continue to lay the blame on the US, but we must also remember that we also have a responsibility.
Yes,
Kagame is an African man,
Yeah.
and he's the one committing crimes in Congo.
So how do Africans stop the rot? Because we have organizations that, at least in theory, are supposed to have some clout in terms of having a conversation with the likes of President Obama, which is the African Union. Where do you see Africa in its potential to be able to have any kind of positive impact on the DRC situation?
I think the African Union would have been the vehicle to do what you have just said. But it's pathetic, because just even look at Libya. The African Union had a clear plan. NATO and this one said no.
It was completely ignored. The press didn't pick it up.
Exactly.
No one heard what
At
was
the
being
moment,
said.
we don't have any defense as a collective defense. So what else can the African Union do? They can sit down and tell President Obama, please stop what is happening, because we know that your people are behind it. Rwanda will not be able to do what you are saying they are doing in Congo now without the US supporting them. But then Obama can nicely look at them, shrug his shoulders, and just ignore them.
Well, talking of which, I mean, the leverage is the unending resources that seem to be continually being tapped. How many centuries has this been happening? And still the resources are there. Surely that is leverage of a huge level for the African nations that have those resources. What's stopping them doing that?
Can I just speak on one simple point quickly? We often, when we speak on the situation in Congo, we ignore the role that other African countries have played. South Africa, for instance, has played an incredible role diplomatically in helping save the Congo. Angola has been incredible in helping save lives in Congo. Although we don't recognize...
You mean in terms of resources?
In terms of
support?
In terms of preventing militia gangs from killing more people and so forth. They do it because they love Africa and they don't claim credit for it.
And they were part of the 20,000 strong UN peacekeeping force?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we shouldn't tar the UN peacekeeping force with just one brush?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. But having said that, clearly, in terms of resources, are a major part of the reason why the US and Britain and other countries continue to be interested in Africa. And it would continue to be so until African leaders takes it upon themselves to become responsible leaders. We have countries such as Namibia, who have loads of diamonds. Nonetheless, Namibia has not failed as Congo and other countries have failed. Now, the leaders in Africa must become responsible
Right, right. Well, perhaps the example of those who have been assassinated could actually be followed through. I mean, we talked about Lumumba, you know, but we've also, you know, got Sankara and other individuals that we can be inspired by, you know, Sankara in Burkina Faso, again assassinated, but with a clear plan for exposing the Western complicity in the oppression of Africans and a very clear plan for how Africans can get together. What's blocking that? That's what a lot of people do not understand.
Because we will always have these Africans who are thinking about their own pockets. Mobutu was used against Lumumba, even when he was his right-hand man. All the time, we have these Africans. And that is the sorry part of our continent. We will always have them. These, is it fifth columnists or... So, it is impossible for us to cross our ranks. Because you always have one of them. I don't want to mention names. All over Africa, you have these so-called opposition leaders who are aspiring to take the presidency. They allow themselves to be used. And they'll continue to be used and used and used. So if you don't want to be assassinated, what do? You just cave in. And so you see young Kabila sitting down there and all this swelling. And Congo, position is because Congo potential is the richest African continent if you are looking at resources wise. And these resources, these big powers want them.
Right.
And so they won't leave Congo alone. It's pathetic the way they have treated the country.
Can you give me a more optimistic view? Do you have one as a Congolese about a way out of this morass to get that kind of Pan-African unified action that to most people seems just like a dream?
Well, I tell you what, peace begins with justice. And in case of Congo and the wider regions, that justice must begin with Kagame answering before an international tribunal for crimes committed in Congo. It must begin with Museveni facing justice for the massacre and ethnic cleansing in Ituri in the eastern province of Congo. It must begin with Kabila, Joseph Kabila, the current president, funding armed groups as well as assassinating politicians, political oppositions.
But they're all puppets, are they not, Baffour? Are we targeting the wrong people?
I was going to say, my brother, the Americans will not permit that. They will not permit Rwanda, Paul Kagame to be taken to the ICC or Museveni, because then they will say, we were just puppets. The real people are behind us.
Right.
And my response to that would be the Congolese people would not allow Kagame or Museveni or Joseph Kabila to get away with these crimes. Kagame would face justice. Equally would Museveni and Joseph Kabila.
They will block it.
They would be.
The Americans, let me tell you one story. Charles Taylor, if he had been wise, to me, I said he signed his own death warrant because Halliburton wanted to exploit the oil resources in Liberia. They were giving them almost nothing. They were going to take it almost for nothing. Charles Taylor said no. They told him, if you said no, then we can protect you.
Okay, I'm afraid we have to stop there with that poignant case of Charles Taylor. That's all the time we have today. Please continue to email Africa Today at africa@presstv.co.uk, or you can text +44 78 0000 8086. Messages are charged at your own local operator rates, don't forget. Thanks to Vava Tampa and Baffour Ankomah for a very enlightening discussion. Join us for another edition of Africa Today next week. Until then, thanks for watching.